Good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the last session of the day. We are also going to have a small note by the JS after this, but this is going to be the last session of the day for sure. Like I said in the morning, it's always a challenge, whether to craft limited sessions, minimal sessions, or large number of sessions. But we thought that jitna zyada de utna acha hai. And that's why, we have so many topics we are trying to cover in one single day. I just enjoyed the other session was happening in the, other room, which was about HR. And that was really amazing, talking about how the HR heads of the BFSI companies are actually hiring for a new talent. This topic specifically is about how the BFSI companies building the tech infrastructure for future. And as the anchor already introduced the panelists here, the only challenge here is Mr. Rajesh Chaudhary, who's supposed to be here from CSB Bank, who's the CIO, is not here. But let me quickly start this conversation and try to get a perspective on how actually the CXOs trying their hard to build the tech infrastructure for the future. And Mr. Tavadia, I will come to you first and take your perspective specifically, because the security exchanges, or specifically the the exchanges, kind of pioneered the digital revolution in India. We never thought that demat or kind of T+2 transactions would happen so seamlessly in this country, and we'll have a large number of population specifically doing that. So considering all these changes happening in the BFSI space now, how BFSI companies are managing and scaling tech infrastructure for the future?
Well, good evening, everybody. The basic thing what one has to remember is the exchanges or the large banks, they are basically a fintech companies, I would say. So rather than the exchange, we ourselves are the fintech companies, and we are the largest, one of the largest consumers of our own services in a way. So there is very little, because we are a regulated entity also, there is the principle behind building your own infrastructure is because you don't want to risk your destiny with somebody else. So because most of the things in a regulated entity, you are responsible for everything. Now, if you outsource certain things, you are dependent on the service providers, the SLAs, the legals, but there's very little in your hand to control anything. And that is one of the main reasons why the exchanges so far have kept on building their own infrastructure, their own data centers. So we in BSE also have a very large, I would not say data center, we have data centers. We have ourselves keep on building. So whatever we have planned, earlier we used to plan for 5 years. Now I think the cycle is getting shorter, because by the time we think it is 3 years, in 2 years down the line, we start planning for the next data center. So that is the way the consumption of the data center is happening. Okay. Now, because we are captive, our own, we have an advantage of refurbishing, changing the way we want it. So that is the way we keep on doing, and it's constantly changing. And it's what we built, say, 5 years ago. Today we are at a stage of refreshing the whole data center, because when you're changing a data center, it's not only the computers that you build or you have procured. The data center technologies itself has changed. The way we build data centers, say 5 years ago, I would not build it in the same way today. Okay, so when you're building exchange, like I said, exchanges are companies. They're not only doing the software part or the technology part or the matching part. We are also, in a way, building data centers. So we build infrastructures, we build large networks. So we are in a sort of conglomerate of the telecom, the cloud providers, the infrastructure providers, and we also do the software part of it, I would say. Okay. And running an exchange is consuming all the resources that you put together.
Yes, noted. I think meaningful thoughts here, Mr. Tavadia. Let me come to you, Mr. Mahajan. And we have seen an interesting rally with CDSL, specifically when IRD and the other insurance companies decided to go for demat or dematerialization of the insurance policies, right? And so perhaps you can give a lot of sense specifically on the data and building infrastructure, because you have to evolve in terms of building capabilities at the depository level, right? So how do you see the tech infrastructure for future, and what are you doing at it?
So from CDSL perspective, I think what you just said, that insurance is going to be another big game changer. And while I was coming here, I got a news flash from RAD agencies. They are saying that LIC is getting into the depository business. So that's the next worry that I have now. But apart from that, yes, we have seen a tremendous amount of growth in the pandemic, in the last 2 years of the pandemic. What we were doing in 2019, we were at 2 odd crores of demat account holders. Just now, I think last week was the news item when India has now 10 crore demat account holders. So we have 7 crore odd out of that 10 crore plus. So if you look at it in the last 3 years, we have grown from 2 crores to 7 crores. So that's phenomenal growth by any parameters. And again, we got stuck in this whole thing that we had not even planned remotely that this kind of growth numbers would come in. And so all the problems that you face for growth in an organization, the tech infrastructure was the first one to take a beating. And we had sleepless nights planning for the growth that we were sitting on. So we have taken a large number of steps. With the infrastructure which we had 3 years back and the infrastructure we have now is completely undergone a change. Not even a single component which was there 3 years is there today. So it's not that we have done a change in mass. It is a piece by piece change that you have to do in the infrastructure. So first, you start with the storage, look at your servers, look at the network components. It's not anything that can be done on day one, but look at it phase-wise. So today we have planned it for the next 5 years, but hopefully I have the same problem in the next 3 years. I would love to solve the problem once again.
Right. I think we are going short term. Interesting points, and let's hope, in fact, it would be a competition for you if your LIC gets into the depository business, but let me tell you, they're planning that since really long. And I remember doing an exclusive story when I was in Z almost 7 years back, because IRDS made it kind of mandatory then. But meaningful thoughts there. Hari, I will come to you. You heard the exchange talking about it. You heard the depository talking about it. Let me take broker's view in terms of how is he scaling up its business specifically on the IT infrastructure and making it ready for the future.
So one interesting perspective which I can give it is from exchange perspective, they have what you call as a fixed business model. They get only certain type of transaction, that's it. The same does with depository as well. But for brokers, it's different. We deal in broking. We deal with distribution on multiple asset classes. So we have the challenges in terms of tech infrastructure is pretty wide. Where the kind of volumes is going to happen tomorrow is very hardly you can anticipate. Okay, suddenly you will see in the last 3 years which taught us that there is no one day is going to be the same. Okay. You will find suddenly there is an influx of orders coming into mutual fund. Suddenly there is going to be a redemption happening, and there's suddenly one fine morning you start moving the tender transactions into capital market side. So it's pretty. So when you start putting up the infrastructure, you don't build for one particular flow. So you got to build for all the kind of products which you offer, which are all type of asset classes, or all type of the capital markets, even exchanges. Now. Take an example, BSE or NSE runs till 3:30 and commodity runs till night 11:55. So which means our infrastructure have to run pretty long. So our team have to run, support it for a pretty longer time. So our infrastructure is also, we need to make sure that, it runs, sustains for the similar load for a longer period of time. So we all know that, that when the market starts at 9:15 to 9:30, there's a heavy load, but that is not the case now. Now you will never know, why there is the load which is happening on a particular time. There is no anticipation into the markets, which means the way you sustain the tech infrastructure is going to be pretty longer. It starts from pretty at 8 o'clock in the morning till about 12 o'clock. We continue to, sustain. We need to sustain the similar load. Second thing is, as a broker, we cannot just offer, make sure that infrastructure is redundant. Now we are also looking at going from the on-prem infrastructure to the cloud, and cloud into multi-cloud as well, because we again cannot depend on one particular cloud infrastructure, which means we started spending multiple investments, same investments multiple times onto the multiple infrastructure. What challenges it provides? One, how do you create a unified experience? Because the moment you start hosting into a multiple infrastructure, you no longer have a same experience. What do you go into a particular cloud provider may not be the same, which you get the similar performance in another cloud provider. But at the end of the day, for your customer, you need to provide a same seamless experience. So this is a bigger challenge for us. Kersi said, we are also not, looking at a much long-term perspective. There is no way that we can look at long-term perspective. So we are looking at, very short-term and grow, because the numbers also growing multi-fold in every 6 months. So the infrastructure spend is also, going in that way. That we are, we moving into on-demand computation into the cloud, which means we can go bring the elasticity to make sure that it supports the kind of business model which we do, and then we continue to store the data in at one place, and move the computation at the cloud, so that we are able to get the best of the both worlds in terms of infrastructure, sustainability, and also the scalability.
Okay. Interesting point. Sustainability and scalability also you mentioned. Himanshu, let me come to you. And it's a dichotomy, a very different view that, Mr. Tavadia said that, taking kind of short-term view. Mr. Mahajan also kind of supported that. Now you come from a tech background. So you tell me, because of the evolution is very rapid, right? The change is very constant. So how do you take a long-term view, or we can't take a long-term view at all now? And where do you think the technology is headed, and how does it support the BFSI sector?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everyone. And so I was hearing the views, absolutely BFSI sector, whether banking or we work for National Stock Exchange as well today. So I come from tech background and represent a company called inMorphis, and we work with ServiceNow as a platform where we help BFSI sector to have the infrastructure which should be reliable, secure, and scalable. All three, because we have seen in COVID, how rapidly and dynamically all the business transactions and the volume of the transaction which has increased. So if I look at it from the long-term point of view, we have to plan few things, right? And we have to create the infrastructure which is service-aware. That's what we now start calling it service-aware based infrastructure. What does it mean? So look at the user journey. A bank says, okay, I have only 5 minutes that my customer should be able to open a saving account. Wherever an insurance product, which we hear this morning is generally push products, right, rather than pull. How we make sure while we are selling a push product, a customer has a consumerized experience, right? So consider the customer experience, the reliability. Reliability means if, let's say, there is a series of applications to complete a particular user journey. So we work with banks where they say, okay, I wanted to acquire customers, but there are 21 applications, internal or external, which are hosted on either on-prem or multi-cloud, has to work together, right? So when these series of applications work together, there could not be a multi-second latency anywhere, or there could not be outage. So if consider there is even a 1 second of outage at one application, the whole user journey is out, right? So it should be a reliable infrastructure, number one. Number two is, I talked about secure. Everyone knows, the security play a very, very important role. It's not just about the regulators like RBI or IRDA or, our government, but also about we play with sensitive data. So it should be absolutely a secure infrastructure. And the third one is the scalability. The scalability means, while we spoke about the multi-cloud, we spoke about, we think about 5 years, and then after 2 years, we think another 5 years. Scalability, right? We have to have buffer, we have to have automation, AI ML engine from the technical point of view, which can give us the trend analysis that how much volume we have to handle, right? What is going wrong? So all these three things, I will say, will help us to have a long-term view on infrastructure, and infrastructure is backbone of being digital today.
Sure, I think meaningful thoughts there, Himanshu. Let me, come with again a very important question, specifically the pain points and the challenges. So it's not just, I mean, obviously it's an integral part. Infrastructure is an integral part. It's a backbone, no doubt about it. But constantly updating it, constantly upgrading it, right, is a big challenge. It's a big pain point. So, Mr. Tavadia, I will come to you, and would you share some pain points, and how do you actually deal with those pain points, while integrating your infrastructure, while upgrading it, while adding new features? How do you do that? How do you deal with the challenges? If you want to share any example case study, please go ahead.
Yeah, if I share examples, I don't have to be quoted by any vendors or sued by any vendors. Okay. Typical examples that we have seen these days, I don't know whether it's designed that way or it is made that way. Any upgrades that are happening, maybe it's at the database level, the operating system level, the hardware level, okay? There's a constant challenge, and the people wanting to say, if I, for example, say, as Microsoft has changed its version to 2019, okay? It will run, and if you have, say, servers which are certain generations, okay, now you have to take a call whether you want to upgrade the software or the hardware. But the choice you don't have, you'll have to upgrade both hardware and the software. So though the hardware is okay, it is running, but if you want to run, say, 2019 hardware, the software on this hardware, they said this is not certified. Okay, so this is a, I don't know, it is a gut-bandhan happening at these marketing places or the companies. Is it that way? Is it designed? I don't know. But this is what I have been facing over the last couple of years. Whenever you want to upgrade certain things, it is you have to change the hardware. So basically what is happening, it is lift and shift, or you basically, so upgrade is a very, very big challenge because you can't upgrade very seamlessly, very cleanly, very economically. So any upgrade is very, very expensive for that matter. At times you think it's better to buy, replace rather than upgrade. So these are the kind of challenges, and this constant thing. Even at the hardware levels, even the big things like storages and all that we deal with, many a times the OEM says, this was 5 years, technology 3 years, will no longer support this. You have to go to, so basically the backward compatibilities, there's no assurances from the hardware OEMs that they will be able to support. And that is the reason what I said, it's very, very difficult to now plan anything 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, because the vendors who sell, you see today, Bajaj scooter was, people were used to use 15 years, 20 years. Today the Bajaj bikes, every 6 months there's a new model. Okay. Similarly, what has happened to the infrastructure industry also, you have Gen 7, Gen 8, Gen 9, every 6 months a new generation comes in, and in 3 years' time, you're 10 generations away, or 5 generations away. Whereas earlier you were expecting the hardware, so nowadays whenever you're buying hardware, we used to buy with 5-year life cycle, or 5-year warranty, or 4-year warranty. Now OEMs are not ready to give 5-year warranty. So basically, I don't even assurance that whether I am buying, whether I will be able to use for 5 years. Though technically it is working, there is absolutely no problem. They say if something goes wrong, we will not be able to service you. So in big corporates, nobody will buy that because if there is no guarantee of running, you will say you better scrap it. It's very painful to let go a working system. So these are the really practical challenges.
Mr. Mahajan?
I think Kersi has just put it very, very aptly, because I've gone through this cycle right now. And let me tell you very, very clearly, all the items, whether it was storage, server, or even the operating system for us, what was there 3 years back is no longer there. I could not go back to the same vendors. It had to be a completely new setup for me. And again, same thing. When you start changing your server, you suddenly realize that the OS that was there on that is no longer compatible on the new servers. So you have to shift. In my case, it was a specific version of Unix. It's not like we will have that problem with a Linux or with Windows. Similarly, on the storage, we were looking at replicating it to 2 different sites, so a 3-way replication. But the old storage just could not do that. So there was no way I could upgrade that storage. So it was a new model completely. So yes, you have to be mentally prepared that what you are buying is going to be junked after 3 or 5 years. 5 years is what we hope. And I would say, Kersi, I was lucky to get a 5-year contract from most of the vendors. So in that way, I'm hopeful that the hardware would be scalable and be serviceable till 5 years. After that, we don't know. But yes, these are real practical challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis.
Really meaningful, those thoughts were. So we discussed important pain points here. Now the major pain point which we all know is about the security. So I will take a perspective on security from here. So let me come to you, Hari, and tell us more about how to ensure a security of tech infrastructure. I think that's very, very critical, right? And deal with the prevalent risks. Yeah.
It's a very interesting question. Especially when we are looking at a multi-cloud environment, or even you have on-prem and a cloud environment, you start setting up the security infrastructure on a respective premises, whether it's going to be an AWS or a GCP. How do you ensure you will get a unified same experience on the security infrastructure? See, what people tend to make mistakes nowadays is they go to AWS and they try to get the advantage of the security infrastructure provided in the AWS. Same happens in the GCP. But what eventually it happens is your entire security team inside their organization now starts looking at security threats at 3 different platforms, okay, which does not behave the same way. So which means the way you deal with the threats, now it's not one, you are actually dealing the same threat thrice, okay. So that's a big problem. So one of the key things which we have done is we made sure that the security infrastructure we go wherever, it's the same security infrastructure we take to the cloud as well. So that means it ensures that my security threats are nullified or managed effectively by only one way. So that's one thing which we have taken it. So second thing is, the moment you are moving from on-prem to cloud, then you are looking at a different kind of security threats. We all know that BFSI is a widely regulated industry compared to any other thing. So which means the threat becomes the threat analysis itself is completely different, because the way we are looking at it, certain data which we cannot even host beyond, outside India, which means we have to store it here. Now, how do you start managing it? Do we have enough infrastructure within the India as well to make sure that this kind of a data is protected completely the moment when you go to the cloud? As long as with this inside your an on-prem infrastructure, you know how to manage it, because you have completely guarded the whole premises. But that is not the way it happens in the in the cloud as well. So even the smallest of the things like encryption at the rest is something which we look at it completely different, because you don't want to deal encryption at rest with the AWS with the way which AWS does and the same the way which GCP does. So we are looking at now a unified KMS solution to make sure that you encrypt with a common way and you keep the key. So what happens is eventually, in order to manage this, you start investing very huge. So your security infrastructure has become the bigger infrastructure spending than anything else, okay? Considering that the threat on the BFSI is higher compared to any other industry, so there's more attack happens to the exchanges, banks, and the depositories or insurance companies. So we are constantly spending, upgrading ourselves, and then trying to create the unified way of experiencing the security also.
Yeah, that was very quick, huh? So, very interesting thoughts here. Himanshu, let me come back to you also, because you are the one who will be kind of providing that system, right? So, how do you actually ensure the security of tech infrastructure and, and deal with the prevalent risks?
Sure. Okay, good question. So, from tech point of view, if I look at it, I think Sir said very good point that, on-prem and we are migrating to the multi-cloud, and every cloud may has to, so the effort goes thrice. I talked about a service-aware, infrastructure, which knows that, okay, my infrastructure is service-ready. Similarly, I will say a unified security posture, whether it is just on-prem or it is multi-cloud or it's a mix of everything. So what we have done and what we have seen at few places, especially BFSI if I talk about, where we cover end-to-end, whether vulnerabilities or security threats or threat intelligence, and what we do is we consolidate everything at one place. And then we convert everything, whatever we have consolidated, we create security incident, and we put the same layer for security operations, because it cannot be really different looking at the infrastructure variation we have today, right? So we need a unified, then I will say second is integrated. It's not just alone, I will say, security posture, just think about security in silos. It has to work with, IT operation. It has to work with our risk. Look at, certain, they have just released the directive that all the CISO has to report all the P1 incidents in 6 days, right? Now look at the pressure which every CISO is going to go through. That first reporting, I think reporting is later, but today first consolidate all the security posture, whether multi-cloud or whether on-prem or whatever infrastructure we are using. Otherwise, we won't be able to give a reliable, secure, and scalable infrastructure to a digital BFSI industry.
Okay. I think security was a very interesting part, and good that both of you actually shared their views. So time is a little limited, but I will still would like all of you to spend at least 1 minute each and give us a future perspective, since you're talking about the building infrastructure for future. So the question is, what is it that the BFSI companies should keep in mind now, while building, rebuilding, reinventing their IT infrastructure, considering that there is going to be a change, considering there are going to be hackers which will try to manipulate your systems, considering the customers will look for seamless services, instant services, and better customer experience. So considering all these challenges, what is it that a CTO, CIO, or whoever is looking at the infrastructure as a vertical in the company should do? I will start with you, sir.
No, basically, we need to look outside of your, since all those guys who are running the captive centers, I would say they'll have to, because at any given point in time, you'll run the limitation of this physical space. Okay, because typically most companies, or even the larger institutions, are located in a area, not typically in a sort of data center type of an area, because now today you have data center cities or data center towns coming up. So, and that's the way it will go through. People will have to move out of their premises and start looking at the larger farms. I think that is the future. I think 5 years ago, I'd said as India will have to get something like IT cities or IT towns or data center towns, you could say, where the only service available is the infrastructure or the data center, and people peripheral systems will use. So something like that is where I think we are seeing this. That's where you'll be able to consume or buy certain things, and there'll be nothing like I said, you'll always buy a service. Now you don't know what hardware or what software it is running on. So long as you're getting that service, like which even Hari said, is giving you a same or similar experience, that should be acceptable. I
think sure, interesting one. Mahajan, sir?
I think I like what Hari had just mentioned in his example, what his company is doing. Going forward, I think that is going to be what Kersi has mentioned, that the physical space is always going to be a constraint. And especially for organizations like us, who are in the rapid phase of growth, for me, I will have to be the custodian of my data. So the responsibility of the data would lie with me, but I would want to have as much of my computational resources to move outside of my control. Not exactly my control, but I would rather have them in the cloud. So because any aspect, if you look at even today a data warehousing application, data warehouse is an old word now, a data lake, or AI/ML engine that I'm trying to run. All these are extremely computational heavy services. That, or from security perspective, if I'm trying to do an analytics on my SIM data. So these services will have to move out, but the data per se will have to stay within your boundaries of your own data center. So I think that is what is the shift that we are going to see. And hopefully we are able to take advantage of that.
Sure, quite meaningful and very interesting part that, yeah. Please.
Again, repeating what Amit said, on-demand computing moving out is going to be the future, the next, because that's where the huge spend is going to be. Data will continue to store, especially for the BFSI, they will continue to store on-prem because we don't want the data to leak, but the computation will go into on-demand. But there are two challenges for that we have at this moment. Okay, if you look at the infrastructure space on the data center, the way you move the data from on-prem to cloud for immediate on-demand computing is not yet there the way we want it. Okay, probably next 2-3 years, probably we may have a much better way of moving the data. Okay, still we go through a lot of heavy lifting to move the data from on-prem to cloud. Okay, I think that is something which is going to be the major change in the next 2 to 3 years, which I'm seeing. If that simplifies, I think you should be able to spin off and do the on-demand computing. It's like in a minutes, and that's kind of ideal situation which we are looking at it, which currently is not there. It still takes about half an hour, 1 hour to do the heavy lifting and then do the computation. So that's going to be the one major change which we are looking in the next 2-3 years, where the on-demand will become seamless experience from the on-prem in terms of heavy lifting of the data, so that we are able to go compute and then take the data back. So that's one thing. Second thing is, again, now that there are multiple players on the the cloud and the data center business, I'm sure there will be a kind of performance consolidation will happen in next 2 to 3 years. Okay, because that will give the much better experience for all the BFSI companies. When they start looking at it now, you don't need to look for one. You can host components in a multiple environment and still produce the same experience to the users. So these two things, the performance consolidation across the vendors, will definitely happen next 2-3 years, because it's kind of in the last 3 years, the way BFSI has changed, right from the pandemic period, the kind of numbers which everyone started looking at it. Now I call it as this a transition phase. Everyone understood the problem statement, but we don't have a solution yet. It's probably about next 1 or 2 years. I think we have the solution coming from the providers in a kind of further kind of performance consolidation.
Quite meaningful, Hari. Himanshu?
Sure. I think I agree with few aspects where the computation goes out and data residency should be there, especially when sensitive data, PII data, we are playing with it, and it's a regulation mandatory as well. And good part is that I have seen use cases. I know today at least 7 BFSI companies, which means in banking and even one of the exchange and also card companies, which exactly did the same thing. When they found that they have to do the consumerized experience, and when they have to increase the business, they have to give the similar experience what Uber or Ola is giving, right? So if the same experience has to give and those products and technologies are there in the cloud, let's use it, but keep the data in-house. And the product have been developed where it play a middleware between keeping the data in-house while doing the computation outside. Along with it, I think efficiency will also play an important role in next 2 to 3 years, where we hear about infrastructure changing it 3 years, 5 years, moving to cloud and all that. Another trend I see is infrastructure automation. I was talking to a CIO of a telco company, and I mean, while we were talking, he mentioned that 69% of their infrastructure requests are automated today, and hence their infrastructure budget has been cut down in last 3 years. However, the business has grown, right? So that is another trend I see, that will get replicated even in BFSI domain, where infrastructure automation can help big time to handle the volume and the transaction what we are going to see in future. That's my view.
Sure, Himanshu, and I think quite meaningful one. Remarkable views, must say that. And the time is already up. Team has already been messaging me since the day has ended. So, great thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Tavadia. Thank you, Mr. Mahajan. Thank you, Himanshu and Hari, for sharing your perspective here. So I think without wasting time, I just say some few words for the closing, as a closing remarks, rather than calling an anchor and then coming back again and talking. Obviously, he will do a fantastic job a little later. I think it was really meaningful. Good to see all of you in a maskless world, actually. It was raining heavily in the morning, but still we could see all of you here and, packed session since morning, and all of you had an active participation. Many of you, in fact, asked us that we should allow you to ask questions, but unfortunately, there is a paucity of time. Honestly, it's not easy for us also to craft a content and invite all the speakers, putting 50 speakers together at one shelter and talking about different topics. And it's not me alone, obviously, or my editorial team alone, but there are so many people who works with us, specifically the operations teams, the camera team. I have worked as a production assistant, so I know how tough it is for the people standing there and shooting and recording all these things for more than 8 to 9 hours. So I really have a big respect for all these people. So I would just say that I would like to thank each one of you for first taking initiative, coming to BKC on a rainy day, struggling with the traffic and attending our sessions, and taking inputs from us. I thank all the speakers. We had more than 50 speakers. And there is one small session left. It's a recording actually, because of the space is limited, we have converted few sessions into recording. So there is one small session which I will do, and then it's done. So, but all the speakers also who took part here. In fact, Mr. Nitesh Ranjan, who is the executive director of Union Bank, who came here and could not attend the session because we had overshot the previous session for 20 minutes, and he had a meeting with finance minister who was in town today, so he had to leave. So, but all these people actually, came all the way to attend the sessions, share their knowledge. There were many people traveled from Bangalore, Kolkata, Chennai, Pune, just to be part of this session. So it's this is what gives us an energy, because the way you embrace us as if we belong to you, I think help us to come with new strategies and new events. So see you perhaps after a quarter, maybe in December or January with another big event or conclave like this. But till then, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.